Imagine standing in the Chamber of Secrets, watching as Harry Potter plunges the basilisk fang into Tom Riddle's diary. The ink bleeds out, Riddle screams, and the nightmare ends. Ginny Weasley opens her eyes. Hogwarts is saved. But what if that fang never pierced the leather? What if Harry was just a moment too late? What if the Chamber of Secrets was never closed? Today we're diving into one of the darkest alternate timelines in Harry Potter history, where a single failure cascades into catastrophe, reshaping the entire wizarding world as we know it. Let's set the stage. It's May 1993, deep beneath Hogwarts Castle. In the original timeline, Harry Potter arrives in the Chamber of Secrets, faces the basilisk, destroys the diary, and saves Ginny Weasley from being permanently possessed by Tom Riddle's memory. But in our alternate timeline, something goes wrong. Maybe Harry doesn't arrive in time. Maybe he's killed by the basilisk before he can grab the sword of Gryffindor. Maybe Fawkes doesn't show up with the sorting hat. Maybe the basilisk fang breaks before it touches the diary. However it happens, the result is the same. The diary remains intact. Tom Riddle's preserved memory continues to drain Ginny's life force, and the Chamber of Secrets remains open, with a fully grown 60-foot basilisk under the control of a 16-year-old version of Lord Voldemort. The immediate consequences are devastating. Without Harry's intervention, Ginny Weasley dies in the chamber. Her life force is completely drained by Tom Riddle, who uses it to fully reconstitute himself into a physical form. This isn't the weak, infant-like form Voldemort took in Goblet of Fire. This is a teenage Tom Riddle, physically present, with a massive basilisk at his command and access to Salazar Slytherin's legendary chamber. He's not as powerful as the adult Voldemort would eventually become, but he's dangerous, intelligent, and he has a deadly weapon that can kill with a single glance. But Riddle doesn't immediately reveal himself. He's always been cunning, always played the long game. Instead, he keeps the basilisk attacks going, but now with more precision and deadliness. Hermione Granger, who was petrified in the original timeline, becomes one of the first victims to actually die. Colin Creevey, who was also merely petrified, is found dead in a corridor, his camera shattered beside him. Justin Finch Fletchley meets the same fate. The attacks escalate because now there's no heroic intervention coming. There's no Harry Potter connecting the dots and racing to save the day. Hogwarts descends into absolute chaos. Parents begin withdrawing their children immediately. The Hogwarts Express runs emergency trips back to London. The Great Hall, usually filled with hundreds of students, becomes sparse and echo-filled. Dumbledore tries to maintain order, but he's fighting a losing battle. He doesn't know about the diary. He doesn't know that Tom Riddle has physically returned. All he knows is that students are dying, and he cannot find the creature responsible, even though he suspects it's a basilisk. The Ministry of Magic, already suspicious of Dumbledore after the events with Quirrell the previous year, loses all patience. Lucius Malfoy and his allies on the Board of Governors don't just suspend Dumbledore this time. They have him arrested and sent to Azkaban for criminal negligence resulting in student deaths. With Dumbledore gone, there's no one powerful enough at Hogwarts to challenge what comes next. Minerva McGonagall tries to hold things together as acting headmistress, but she's overwhelmed. She doesn't have Dumbledore's knowledge of Voldemort's past, doesn't understand what they're truly facing. The Ministry sends in a team of Aurors, but they're hunting blindly. They search the castle from top to bottom, but they never think to check the girls' bathroom on the second floor. They never discover the entrance to the chamber because Moaning Myrtle isn't talking, terrified of the basilisk that killed her 50 years ago. The Auror's presence actually makes things worse because Tom Riddle, hiding in the shadows with his diary intact, uses this confusion to his advantage. By the end of May 1993, the Ministry makes a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is closed indefinitely. For the first time in nearly 1,000 years, the castle's doors are shut to students. The official statement cites ongoing security threats and multiple student fatalities. The school year ends abruptly. Students are sent home. The staff is dismissed. Only a skeleton crew of Ministry officials remains, continuing their fruitless search for the beast that's been killing Muggleborns. But the beast and its master have already gone underground, literally. Tom Riddle retreats deeper into the chamber, planning his next moves patient as ever. Now let's talk about what this means for Harry Potter specifically. In the original timeline, Harry's second year was transformative. He proved he belonged in Gryffindor, showed he wasn't the heir of Slytherin, destroyed a Horcrux without even knowing what it was, and saved Ginny Weasley. cementing his friendship with the Weasley family forever. But in this timeline, none of that happens. Instead, Harry experiences devastating failure at age 12. He either never made it to the chamber in time, or he tried and failed. Either way, Ginny Weasley is dead, and Harry carries that weight. The Weasley family is shattered. Arthur and Molly lose their only daughter, the child Molly had always wanted, the baby of the family. Their grief is unimaginable, but worse than grief is the blame. Ron Weasley, Harry's best friend, is consumed by rage and sorrow. He knows his sister was possessed. He knows she was taken into the chamber. And somewhere in his 13-year-old mind, twisted by trauma, he blames Harry. Why didn't Harry figure it out sooner? Why didn't he save her? The friendship between Harry Potter and Ron Weasley doesn't just cool, it dies. Ron refuses to speak to Harry, the last thing he says to him before leaving Hogwarts for what they both think is the final time is that he wishes Harry had never come to the wizarding world at all. Harry returns to the Dursleys that summer carrying crushing guilt. He's 12 years old, and he feels responsible for Ginny's death, for Hermione's death, for Colin's death, for everything. The Dursleys, sensing his misery, are worse than ever. Without Hogwarts to return to, Harry faces the prospect of living with them permanently. He has no escape, no magical education, no future in the wizarding world. The boy who lived starts to wonder if he should have died as a baby after all. The prophecy that binds him to Voldemort means nothing if he never gets trained to face him. Dumbledore, the only person who truly understood Harry's importance, is in Azkaban, wrongfully imprisoned while the real threat grows stronger. But what about the other students? What happens to everyone else when Hogwarts closes? The wizarding world scrambles to find solutions. Some wealthy pureblood families send their children to foreign schools. Durmstrang becomes a popular choice for those with the means and the right blood status, despite its dark reputation. Beauxbatons accepts some students, though the language barrier is difficult. Some students transfer to smaller British magical schools that usually operate in Hogwarts' shadow, tiny institutions that suddenly find themselves overwhelmed with applications. But many students, especially those from poorer families or Muggle-born backgrounds, simply lose access to magical education entirely. They're sent to regular schools, forced to suppress their magic, watching their abilities atrophy without training. Hermione Granger's parents are killed alongside their daughter in some versions of this timeline, or they're devastated by her loss in others. If Hermione died, the wizarding world loses one of the brightest witches of her generation before she ever reached her potential. If she survived, she's traumatized, possibly sent to a foreign school where she throws herself into her studies with even more intensity, trying to understand what went wrong, researching basilisks and dark magic obsessively, becoming harder and more focused on fighting dark wizards at any cost. Neville Longbottom's grandmother considers Hogwarts closure a disgrace and ships him off to a strict magical institution in Scotland that emphasizes discipline and traditional magic. Neville, away from the friends who helped him build confidence, retreats further into his shell. Luna Lovegood loses one of the few places where, despite the teasing, she felt she belonged. Draco Malfoy's education continues privately, his father hiring the best tutors money can buy, ensuring his son learns not just magic but the pure-blood supremacist ideology that's about to reshape wizarding Britain. Speaking of Lucius Malfoy, let's talk about him because he's the biggest winner in this timeline's early stages. He planted the diary on Ginny Weasley, intending to discredit Arthur Weasley and reopen the chamber to purge Muggleborns. In the original timeline, his plan failed spectacularly. His diary was destroyed, Dobby was freed, and his reputation was damaged. But in this timeline, his plan succeeds beyond his wildest dreams. Muggle-born students are killed, Hogwarts is closed, Dumbledore is imprisoned, and Lucius himself faces no consequences because no one discovers his role in the plot. The diary never resurfaces. Tom Riddle, reconstituted in the chamber, keeps it hidden. As far as anyone knows, the chamber opened on its own, or perhaps through some accident. Lucius is free, powerful, and ready to capitalize on the chaos. With Dumbledore in Azkaban and the wizarding world in disarray, the Ministry of Magic shifts dramatically toward pureblood interests. Cornelius Fudge, already a weak minister, becomes a puppet for wealthy families like the Malfoys. Legislation that Dumbledore would have fought against starts passing. Restrictions on Muggleborns, requirements for blood status registration, investigations into half-breed creatures. The wizarding world, traumatized by the Hogwarts attacks and desperate for security, accepts these measures more readily than they would have in stable times. Fear makes people willing to sacrifice freedom for the promise of safety. Lucius Malfoy and his fellow Death Eaters, the ones who escaped Azkaban by claiming they were under the Imperious Curse, begin consolidating power openly, not even needing to hide behind masks anymore. But here's where things get truly dangerous. Tom Riddle, now physically present at age 16 with all his memories intact, doesn't stay hidden forever. He's patient, but he's also ambitious. He begins making contact with his former followers. Remember, this is still 1993. Voldemort wasn't supposed to return until 1995 at the earliest in the original timeline, but now he's back 2 years early, and he's back with a clarity of mind that the weakened, desperate Voldemort of Goblet of Fire never had. He's young, charismatic, and he already has one major advantage. The basilisk riddle begins small. He uses the confusion of Hogwarts' closure to slip out of the castle. The Ministry guards are looking for a monster, not a handsome teenage boy. He retrieves some of his old possessions, things he'd hidden decades ago. He makes contact with Lucius Malfoy, revealing himself as the diary's creator, as the heir of Slytherin, as Lord Voldemort. Lucius is terrified at first, then exhilarated. His master has returned, and returned strong. Together, they begin planning not just Voldemort's full restoration, but the complete transformation of wizarding society. One of the first things Voldemort does is recover his other Horcruxes. In the original timeline, he didn't know they'd been endangered until much later. But now, with Lucius's help, he retrieves the ring from the Gaunt Shack, checks on the locket in the cave, ensures the cup is safe in Bellatrix's vault. The diadem remains in the Room of Requirement, undiscovered. Nagini hasn't been made into a Horcrux yet because that required Bertha Jorkin's murder, which hasn't happened in this timeline. But even without Nagini, Voldemort has 5 Horcruxes intact, plus his restored body, making him nearly invincible. And no one, absolutely no one, knows what a Horcrux is except Dumbledore, who's rotting in Azkaban, accused of the deaths Voldemort himself caused. By late 1993, strange disappearances begin. Muggleborns who escaped the Hogwarts attacks start vanishing from their homes. Entire families gone overnight. The Ministry investigates half-heartedly, more concerned with maintaining the appearance of control than actually solving crimes. The Daily Prophet runs articles blaming the victims, suggesting they've fled Britain or gone into hiding voluntarily. But those in the know, those connected to the old Order of the Phoenix, understand what's happening. Voldemort is consolidating power, eliminating threats, and building his forces. And without Dumbledore to organize resistance, there's no coordinated opposition. Let's pause here and consider the international implications. The closure of Hogwarts sends shockwaves through the global wizarding community. Hogwarts wasn't just any school. It was one of the most prestigious magical institutions in the world, rivaling only Durmstrang and Beauxbaton in reputation. Its closure suggests that magical Britain is unstable, possibly dangerous. Foreign ministries issue travel warnings. International magical cooperation, never strong to begin with, deteriorates. Some countries offer asylum to fleeing British wizards. Others close their borders, afraid the violence will spread. The International Confederation of Wizards debates intervention, but ultimately decides on a policy of non-interference in British internal affairs. This isolation plays directly into Voldemort's hands. When he eventually makes his move for total power, no help will come from abroad. Now let's fast forward to 1994. In the original timeline, this would be the year of the Triwizard Tournament. The year Voldemort finally returned to full power through the elaborate plot involving Harry Potter's blood. But in our timeline, Voldemort has already returned. There is no Triwizard Tournament because there's no Hogwarts to host it. Instead, 1994 is the year everything falls apart. By this point, Tom Riddle has spent over a year building his power base. He's recruited new Death Eaters, bringing in young purebloods who see him as the solution to the chaos he himself created. He's eliminated key opposition figures through assassination and intimidation, and he's performed enough dark rituals, possibly using the basilisk's venom and other rare ingredients from the chamber, to enhance his already considerable powers. The tipping point comes when Voldemort orchestrates a mass breakout from Azkaban. This is easier in 1994 than it was in the original timeline's 1996 because Voldemort is stronger and the Ministry is weaker. The Dementors, never truly loyal to the Ministry, switch sides immediately. Bellatrix Lestrange is freed, along with Antonin Dolohov, the Lestrange brothers, and dozens of other dangerous Death Eaters. But here's the crucial difference. In the original timeline, this breakout was a declaration of war that everyone recognized. In our timeline, Voldemort and his Death Eaters don't need to declare war. They've already won the quiet battle for control of institutions. The breakout isn't the beginning of open conflict. It's just the removal of the last obstacles. Within weeks of the Azkaban breakout, the Ministry of Magic falls. Not through a dramatic battle, but through a calculated political coup. Minister Fudge is found dead in his office, officially ruled a heart attack, but everyone knows the truth. The Wizengamot, already packed with Death Eater sympathizers, elects a new minister, a pureblood wizard completely under Voldemort's control. The Daily Prophet, which has been gradually shifting its editorial stance for years, now openly promotes pureblood supremacist views. Aurors who resist are quietly removed from their positions, arrested on false charges, or simply disappear. By the end of 1994, magical Britain is effectively a dictatorship, though Voldemort himself remains in the shadows, not yet revealing himself as the true power behind the throne. What about Dumbledore during all this? He's been in Azkaban for over a year at this point. Even Dumbledore can't maintain perfect clarity of mind after prolonged exposure to Dementors. He's weakened, aged rapidly, his spirit battered by the creatures that feed on hope and happiness. Some of the Order of the Phoenix have tried to break him out, but Azkaban is virtually impregnable, especially now that the Dementors are actively working against any rescue attempt. A few members of the Order, like Remus Lupin and Kingsley Shacklebolt, have tried to organize resistance, but without Dumbledore's leadership and resources, they're scattered, disorganized, and constantly on the run. Many have fled the country. Others have gone into deep hiding. A few, like Mad-Eye Moody, continue fighting a guerrilla campaign, but they're losing badly. And Harry Potter? By 1994, Harry is 14 years old, still living with the Dursleys, still cut off from the magical world. He's survived, but barely. The magical trace on him expired when he turned 17, but that's years away. And even now, occasional bursts of accidental magic remind the Dursleys of what he is, leading to worse abuse. Harry gets letters sometimes, smuggled to him by members of the Order who haven't forgotten about him. They tell him to stay hidden, stay safe, that they'll come for him when the time is right. But Harry reads between the lines. They're losing. The wizarding world is falling to darkness, and he, the boy who lived, the one who supposedly defeated Voldemort as a baby, is powerless to stop it. Some versions of this timeline include a desperate rescue attempt. Maybe Remus Lupin, feeling guilty about leaving Harry isolated for so long, breaks him out of Privet Drive. Maybe Sirius Black, who in the original timeline escaped Azkaban in 1993, manages to escape in this timeline too, though under different circumstances, and comes for his godson. If Harry is rescued and brought into the underground resistance, he becomes a symbol, but also a target. Voldemort knows about the prophecy. He knows Harry Potter is supposed to be the one with the power to defeat him. With Dumbledore out of the picture, Voldemort makes finding and killing Harry a top priority. Imagine Harry at 14, undertrained, traumatized, suddenly thrust into a war he's not ready for. In the original timeline, he had years at Hogwarts learning magic, making friends, building confidence. In this timeline, he's had none of that. He knows some basic spells from his first year, but nothing more. He can't conjure a Patronus. He doesn't know advanced defensive magic. He's never even heard the term Horcrux. If the Order tries to train him quickly, it's a desperate, rushed education, teaching him just enough to survive, not enough to win. And all the while, Death Eaters are hunting him, tracking every safe house, every hiding spot. The Resistance fights on, but it's a losing battle. Without Hogwarts, there's no new generation of trained witches and wizards to join the fight. The young people who should be graduating and joining the Order are instead scattered across Europe, undertrained or dead. Voldemort's forces grow stronger while the opposition dwindles. By 1995, the year Voldemort officially returned in the original timeline, in this timeline he no longer needs to hide at all. He reveals himself publicly, appearing at a ministry gathering, and no one dares oppose him. He doesn't call himself Minister of Magic. He takes an older, more ominous title. He declares himself the Lord of Magical Britain, the heir of Slytherin, the rightful ruler of wizardkind. What happens next is the darkest period in modern magical history. Muggle-born registration becomes mandatory. Those who don't comply are arrested, and arrest means the Dementor's kiss or worse. Mixed blood families are broken apart, with pureblood members forced to denounce their Muggle-born relatives or face punishment themselves. Hogwarts eventually reopens, but as a completely different institution. Headmaster Snape, assuming he survives this long and maintains Voldemort's trust, oversees a school that teaches dark magic openly, that promotes pureblood ideology, that trains children to become the next generation of Death Eaters. Muggle-borns are banned entirely. Half-bloods are admitted but segregated and treated as second-class students. The Muggle world isn't safe either. Voldemort, with control over magical Britain secured, turns his attention to the non-magical population. In the original timeline, he was content to work within the shadows, manipulating but not openly warring with Muggles. But in this timeline, emboldened by his easy victory and unchecked by any opposition, he begins a campaign of terror. Muggle towns near magical communities are attacked. The British Muggle government notices something is wrong, patterns of disappearances and unexplained disasters, but they don't understand what they're facing. The Muggle Prime Minister, who in the original timeline had at least some contact with the magical world through the Minister of Magic, now has no one to turn to. The barrier between the magical and non-magical worlds begins to break down in the worst possible way. International intervention becomes a real possibility, but it's complicated. If foreign magical governments try to invade Britain to remove Voldemort, they risk exposing the magical world to Muggles on a massive scale. Voldemort knows this and uses it as a shield. He threatens that any invasion will result in him deliberately revealing magic to Muggles worldwide, sparking global chaos. Most foreign ministries decide that a Dark Lord ruling Britain is preferable to the complete collapse of the Statute of Secrecy, so they close their borders, protect their own territories, and leave British wizards to their fate. Some foreign wizards and witches join the British resistance as volunteers, but not nearly enough to turn the tide. Let's consider what happens to specific characters in this nightmare timeline. Ron Weasley, consumed by grief and anger over Ginny's death, takes a dark path. In some versions of this timeline, he's radicalized by Death Eater propaganda that blames Dumbledore and Harry for Hogwarts closure. He might even be recruited, a tragic corruption of a character who was supposed to be Harry's loyal best friend. In other versions, he joins the resistance but becomes brutal, willing to use dark magic and questionable tactics, losing the moral compass that should have guided him. Either way, the kind-hearted boy who loved his family and his friends is gone, replaced by someone hardened and bitter, Fred and George Weasley. The twins who brought laughter to Hogwarts never get to open Weasley's wizard wheezes. Their joke shop dreams die with their sister. They might join the resistance, using their creativity to develop magical weapons and traps instead of jokes. Or they might flee abroad, unable to cope with the loss and the darkness consuming Britain. Percy Weasley's ambitious nature could lead him anywhere. He might join the Death Eater-controlled ministry, telling himself he's trying to change things from within, but really just advancing his career. Or he might reconcile with his family earlier than in the original timeline, united by tragedy. Arthur and Molly Weasley are broken by Ginny's death. Their warm, welcoming home becomes a place of mourning. Molly, who treated Harry like a son, might blame him for Ginny's fate, or she might cling to him, seeing him as the last connection to her daughter. Arthur's faith in Muggle-loving policies is tested when the world he believed in collapses. They're both prime targets for Death Eaters, and their fate in this timeline is grim. They might be killed in the early days of Voldemort's purges, martyrs whose deaths galvanize what's left of the resistance. Or they survive in hiding, haunted by what they've lost, supporting the fight but never quite recovering. Severus Snape faces an impossible situation. In the original timeline, he was Dumbledore's agent inside Voldemort's organization, playing both sides, working toward Voldemort's eventual defeat to honor Lily Potter's memory. But in this timeline, Dumbledore is in Azkaban, possibly dead, and there's no one coordinating the resistance. Snape has to choose whether to fully commit to Voldemort, truly becoming the Death Eater he once was, or to join the scattered resistance, finally stepping into the light. His love for Lily and his guilt over her death probably push him toward protecting Harry, but it's a much harder path when there's no Dumbledore to provide cover. If Snape tries to help Harry and is discovered, his death is certain and brutal. Voldemort doesn't forgive traitors. Hagrid, who loved Hogwarts more than almost anyone, is devastated by the school's closure. He probably stays on the grounds as long as possible, caring for the Forbidden Forest and its creatures even as the castle stands empty. When Hogwarts reopens under Death Eater control, he's faced with an impossible choice. He can't stand to see the school he loves perverted into a dark magic training center. He might join the Resistance, his loyalty to Dumbledore overcoming his usual fear of conflict. His giant heritage, usually a source of discrimination, becomes useful in the fight. Or he goes into exile, living deep in the forest, a reminder of what Hogwarts used to be. Draco Malfoy grows up in this timeline, watching his father's star rise. Lucius is one of Voldemort's closest advisors, basking in power and prestige. Draco is groomed to be a Death Eater from an early age, not the reluctant, conflicted one from the original timeline, but a true believer. Without Hogwarts to expose him to different perspectives, without friendships that might have complicated his worldview, Draco becomes everything his father wanted. He's dangerous, skilled in dark magic, and completely committed to pure-blood supremacy. He might even become one of Voldemort's favorites, a young prodigy raised in the New Order. What about Luna Lovegood? Her father's newspaper, The Quibbler, becomes one of the only sources of Resistance information, publishing coded messages and true news under the guise of its usual eccentric content. Luna herself, with her unique perspective and unshakable core, might be more important in this timeline than in the original. She sees through lies, notices things others miss, and her belief in impossible things makes her perfect for the Resistance. She becomes a courier, a spy, someone who can move through dangerous situations because people underestimate the strange girl with the dreamy expression. But it's a dangerous role, and Luna's fate in this timeline is uncertain. Neville Longbottom's character arc is fascinating to consider. In the original timeline, he grew from a forgetful, anxious boy into a true Gryffindor, someone brave enough to stand up to Voldemort himself. In this timeline, that growth might happen faster, forced by circumstances. When the Death Eaters take over, they target anyone connected to the original fight against Voldemort, and that includes Neville's parents. If he learns about his parents' torture at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, it might ignite a determination in him years earlier. He could become a key Resistance fighter, driven by a need to avenge his parents and fight the same evil that destroyed them. Or the trauma could break him, leaving him hiding, afraid to fight. The hero he might have been never emerging. The prophecy about Harry and Voldemort becomes both more and less important in this timeline. It still exists, recorded in the Department of Mysteries. Voldemort still knows part of it and fears it. But without Dumbledore to guide Harry toward fulfilling it, without the training and preparation and carefully laid plans, the prophecy becomes almost a cruel joke. Harry is the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, but how can he when he doesn't know how? The prophecy doesn't guarantee victory, it only states that Harry has the potential. In this timeline, that potential goes unrealized. Unless somehow against all odds, Harry figures it out. Maybe the Horcrux in his scar gives him insights he shouldn't have. Maybe fragments of the Resistance, people like Lupin or Sirius if he's free, piece together enough of Dumbledore's knowledge to understand what needs to be done. Maybe they break Dumbledore out of Azkaban in a desperate gambit, and the old wizard, weakened but not defeated, shares what he knows about Horcruxes. If Harry learns the truth, that Voldemort has split his soul into multiple pieces, that destroying these Horcruxes is the only way to make him mortal again, then there's a chance, however slim. Hunting Horcruxes without Dumbledore's knowledge and preparation would be incredibly difficult. No one knows where all of them are. The ring at the Gaunt Shack, the locket in the cave, Hufflepuff's cup in Gringotts, Ravenclaw's diadem in Hogwarts, the diary which Tom Riddle still possesses, and Harry himself, though he doesn't know it. Even if the Resistance discovers some of these locations, retrieving the Horcruxes is dangerous. The protections Voldemort placed on them are deadly. In the original timeline, Dumbledore died from the curse on the ring. Harry nearly died in the cave. The cup required breaking into the most secure bank in the wizarding world. How can an untrained teenager and a scattered Resistance force accomplish what the greatest wizard of the age barely managed? But desperate times call for desperate measures. Maybe the Resistance raids Gringotts, fighting through Death Eater guards and bank security, sacrificing lives to reach the Lestrange vault. Maybe they torture the location of the Gaunt Shack out of a captured Death Eater. Maybe Harry, driven by guilt and determination, pushes himself beyond his limits, learning magic he shouldn't be able to perform, powered by love and rage and the need to make things right. If they manage to destroy even one Horcrux, it proves Voldemort can be beaten. It gives hope to the resistance and terror to the Death Eaters. Voldemort, secure in his power, might not realize his Horcruxes are being destroyed until it's too late. He's arrogant, convinced of his invulnerability. The idea that a group of ragged rebels could threaten him seems absurd, but each destroyed Horcrux weakens him, makes him more vulnerable, brings him closer to mortality. If they destroy enough, if they get down to the last one or two, Voldemort realizes what's happening and panics. He calls all his forces to protect his remaining Horcruxes, pulling Death Eaters back from their campaigns of terror. The war shifts from the resistance barely surviving to an actual fight, with objectives and strategy, not just running and hiding. The final battle, if it happens, would be very different from the Battle of Hogwarts in the original timeline. There's no massive army of students and teachers defending the castle, because Hogwarts is under Death Eater control. Instead, the battle might take place at Riddle Manor, or the Ministry of Magic, or wherever Voldemort keeps his last Horcrux. It's a small group of resistance fighters, maybe 20 or 30 people, against hundreds of Death Eaters. The odds are impossible. People die. Characters who survived the original timeline fall here. Maybe Ron dies protecting Harry, finally finding redemption. Maybe Lupin falls, or Tonks, or McGonagall. The cost is horrific, but if they reach Voldemort, if they've destroyed his Horcruxes, if Harry faces him one last time, then the prophecy can be fulfilled. The battle between them isn't the elegant duel from the books, no twin cores creating priori incantatem. It's desperate, brutal, both of them throwing everything they have at each other. Harry is fighting not just for himself, but for Ginny, for Hermione, for everyone who died because he failed. Voldemort is fighting for the empire he's built, refusing to believe that a teenage boy can defeat him. When the curse strikes Voldemort, when he finally falls, it's not triumphant. It's exhausted relief. He's dead, but so are so many others. The victory is hollow, or maybe they don't win. Maybe the odds are too great, the Horcrux is too well protected, Voldemort too powerful. Maybe Harry dies trying, fulfilling the prophecy not by defeating Voldemort, but by sacrificing himself to give others a chance. Maybe the resistance is wiped out, their last desperate attack failing. Maybe Voldemort's reign continues. Britain becomes a dark wizarding state and the nightmare persists for decades. The timeline where the Chamber of Secrets was never closed becomes a timeline where darkness wins, where evil triumphs because good people failed or were stopped at a crucial moment. The international wizarding community watches in horror as Britain falls to darkness. Some countries accept refugees, creating communities of British exiles who dream of someday liberating their homeland. Others seal their borders completely, determined that Voldemort's influence won't spread. A few nations consider military intervention, assembling armies of witches and wizards. But the logistics are nightmarish and the risk of exposing magic to muggles stops them. Voldemort, meanwhile, consolidates his control, transforms Britain into his vision of a pure-blood paradise, and begins looking outward. Ireland is closest. France is tempting. The wars that could follow would reshape the entire magical world. The Muggle government of Britain knows something is catastrophically wrong, but doesn't know what. Disappearances number in the thousands. Entire communities go dark. Strange phenomena that used to be explained away or covered up by the ministry are now happening openly. Some Muggle officials who investigate too closely are killed or memory-charmed so thoroughly they're left as shells. A few survive to tell stories that no one believes. Tales of people with wands, of monsters, of a war happening in the shadows. Conspiracy theories spread, but they're dismissed as paranoia, even as the evidence mounts. If Voldemort decides to fully reveal the magical world, the consequences are unimaginable. The statute of secrecy maintained for centuries shatters. Muggles around the world learn that magic is real, that there's a hidden society that's been living alongside them, that there's a dark wizard who's taken over magical Britain and might come for them next. Some Muggles panic. Others demand action. Muggle governments, already dealing with terrorism and international conflicts, now face an entirely new threat. Do they negotiate with Voldemort? Try to fight him with Muggle weapons? Seek alliances with foreign magical governments? The technology gap is interesting to consider. It's the 1990s, so Muggle technology is advanced, but not at modern levels. No smartphones, no social media, but computers and the internet are emerging. Nuclear weapons exist. If Muggle Britain tried to bomb Hogwarts or other magical sites, would it work? Wizards have powerful protective enchantments, but they've never faced anything like modern weapons. The resulting conflict could go either way, or more likely, create a stalemate where neither side can fully defeat the other, leading to a long, grinding war that devastates Britain. Some members of the resistance flee to the Muggle world, living as Muggles, using their magic only in emergencies. They become urban legends, stories of people who can do impossible things, who save people from accidents or crimes with a wave of their hand before disappearing. They're trying to survive, but they also can't help but use their powers to do good, even in small ways. Harry, if he's alive and on the run, might be one of these, living in Muggle London under a false name, working a normal job, trying to be ordinary even though he never can be. The psychological impact on survivors is immense. Wizards and witches who grew up in the Golden Age before Voldemort's return, who remember Hogwarts as a place of wonder and learning, who believed in a world where good triumphed over evil, have had those beliefs shattered. They suffer from trauma, depression, survivor's guilt. Those who lived through the first war against Voldemort and thought it was over, who believed they'd won, now face the horror of realizing they didn't win. They just delayed the inevitable. The older generation feels they failed their children, failed to protect them from repeating history, failed to keep the peace. Younger people, those who came of age during Voldemort's reign, don't remember anything different. They grow up in a world where Death Eaters patrol the streets, where Muggleborns are hunted, where dark magic is taught openly. Some resist, clinging to stories of how things used to be, inspired by tales of Dumbledore and Harry Potter. Others accept it as normal, the only world they've known, and become the next generation of oppressors. A society polarizes between those who remember freedom and those who don't, between those who fight and those who collaborate. If we extend this timeline far enough into the future, we see a wizarding Britain completely transformed. Muggle-born magic users might be extinct in Britain, either killed, driven out, or never discovered and trained in the first place. The genetic diversity of the magical population declines as pure-blood families, already small in number, intermarry to the point of dangerous inbreeding. Squibs are born more frequently. Magic itself might weaken over generations. Voldemort's victory becomes Pyrrhic as he presides over a dying society. Or perhaps Voldemort, having achieved total control, becomes bored. He's always been driven by fear of death and desire for power. But once he has absolute power, what's left? He could become even more obsessed with immortality, performing dark rituals, experimenting on his subjects, trying to transcend mortality entirely. He might succeed in becoming something beyond human, beyond even wizard, a creature of pure magic and malevolence. Or his experiments fail and he destroys himself, leaving a power vacuum that plunges Britain into civil war as Death Eaters fight each other for control. There's a version of this timeline where Neville Longbottom becomes the hero the prophecy spoke of. The prophecy could have applied to either Harry or Neville, both born at the end of July to parents who defied Voldemort 3 times. If Harry fails or dies, maybe Neville steps up. Maybe losing everything, watching his world burn, forges him into the warrior he needs to be. He leads what's left of the resistance, hunts down Horcruxes, faces Voldemort in Harry's place. The boy who could have been the chosen one becomes the chosen one by default, proving that prophecies are about choices as much as fate. Neville's victory would be even more unexpected than Harry's, the ultimate underdog story, and perhaps more satisfying because he had even less reason to believe he could succeed. The role of creatures in this conflict is worth exploring in depth. Giants, who Hagrid tried to recruit in the original timeline, likely side with Voldemort more readily when he's winning. The giants have been persecuted for centuries, driven to the edges of civilization, hunted and killed. When Voldemort offers them a place in his new order, promises them revenge against the wizards who oppress them, many accept. They become shock troops in his army, towering figures capable of destroying entire buildings with their bare hands. The resistance has no counter for giants except to avoid them, to flee when they appear on the battlefield. A giant charging through a defensive line is unstoppable, a force of nature made flesh. Werewolves, discriminated against by mainstream wizarding society for generations, are divided in their loyalties. Some remember the prejudice, the laws that prevented them from getting jobs, the way they were treated as monsters rather than people. When Voldemort promises them equality, or at least a chance to take revenge on those who oppress them, some werewolves join his cause. Fenrir Greyback, already a Death Eater, becomes even more prominent in this timeline. leading packs of werewolves in attacks on villages and resistance strongholds. The full moon becomes a time of terror, when werewolf attacks are guaranteed, when the resistance has to hide even more carefully. But not all werewolves join Voldemort. Some, inspired by Remus Lupin's example, fight alongside the resistance. They remember that Dumbledore gave Lupin a chance when no one else would, that the Order of the Phoenix treated them as equals. These werewolves become valuable allies, their enhanced senses and strength useful in combat, their knowledge of their dark counterparts helping the resistance anticipate attacks. But they're always viewed with suspicion, always having to prove their loyalty, always aware that one moment of lost control during a transformation could turn them into the monsters people fear. Centaurs remain neutral for the most part, watching from the Forbidden Forest, reading the future in the stars. They see Voldemort's rise, see the darkness spreading, but they don't intervene. Centaurs have always believed in fate, in the movements of celestial bodies determining the course of history. If Voldemort's victory is written in the stars, they won't fight against it. This fatalism infuriates those in the resistance who beg for their help, but centaurs are stubborn in their beliefs. However, if the stars show a chance of Voldemort's defeat, if the prophecy about Harry Potter aligns with their readings, they might intervene at a crucial moment. A charge of centaurs, arrows flying, could turn the tide of a battle, but only if they believe destiny demands it. House elves are perhaps the most tragic victims of this timeline. Bound by magic to serve, they have no choice but to obey their masters. When their masters are Death Eaters, they're forced to participate in atrocities, to torture prisoners, to help with dark rituals, all while being unable to refuse. Some house elves suffer immense psychological damage from being forced to do terrible things. Others become desensitized, accepting cruelty as normal because they have no framework for resistance. But a few brave house elves, inspired by Dobby's example if he's still alive and free in this timeline, find ways to sabotage their masters. They interpret orders in ways that minimize harm. They accidentally ruin important documents. They pass information to the resistance when they can. It's incredibly dangerous. If caught, a house elf faces torture or death, and their nature makes it almost impossible to lie convincingly to their masters. But some do it anyway, finding courage in the most unexpected places. Dobby himself, if he managed to gain freedom before everything fell apart, becomes a symbol for house elf liberation. He helps other house elves escape servitude when possible, creating an underground network. Some freed house elves join the resistance directly, using their powerful magic in combat. House elf magic is different from wizard magic, more instinctive and in some ways more powerful. A house elf who chooses to fight is a formidable ally. But most wizards, even those in the resistance, don't think to ask house elves for help. So blinded by centuries of viewing them as servants that they can't see them as equals or warriors. Dementors, already allied with Voldemort after abandoning the Ministry, make the conflict even darker than it already is. These creatures feed on happiness, on hope, on every positive emotion, leaving only despair. Voldemort deploys them not just as guards but as weapons of psychological warfare. They're sent into areas where resistance is strong, where communities still have hope, and they drain that hope away. People who were ready to fight become hollow shells, barely able to function, let alone resist. The presence of Dementors turns brave people into broken ones, makes heroes into victims. The Patronus charm becomes the most valuable spell in the Resistance's arsenal, but not everyone can cast one. It requires powerful positive emotions, happy memories, and many people living through this nightmare can't access those feelings anymore. The Resistance establishes training camps where those who can cast Patronuses teach others, trying to create a defense against the Dementors. But it's difficult. How do you think happy thoughts when everything you love has been destroyed? How do you conjure hope when the world is ending? Those who master the Patronus charm become invaluable. They lead rescue missions into Dementor-infested areas, protect safe houses, guard other Resistance members. The sight of a Patronus, a silver guardian of light in the darkness, becomes a symbol of the Resistance itself. It represents the idea that even in the darkest times, even when all seems lost, some light remains. Some people still fight. Some people still hope. Dragons, controlled by the Ministry in the original timeline for research and security purposes, are now under Death Eater control. These massive, powerful creatures are turned into weapons of war. A Hungarian horntail that nearly killed Harry in the Triwizard Tournament is nothing compared to multiple dragons deployed strategically in attacks. Dragons can level buildings, incinerate entire squads of fighters, spread terror just by appearing in the sky. The resistance has no good counter for dragons. You can't outfight a dragon with conventional magic. Shield charms fail against dragonfire. The only real defense is to hide, to go underground, to make sure dragons can't find you. Some resistance fighters become specialized in dragon handling, people like Charlie Weasley if he's still alive and active. They understand dragon behavior, know how to calm them, might even be able to turn some dragons away from Death Eater control. But it's incredibly dangerous work. One mistake means being incinerated or torn apart. Some dragons, particularly the more intelligent breeds, might resist their captivity. Dragons aren't naturally loyal to anyone. They're kept through force, through magic, through chains and spells. If those restraints weaken, if someone sabotages the control mechanisms, dragons might turn on their handlers. A rogue dragon is dangerous to everyone, but Death Eaters losing control of their weapons could create opportunities for the resistance to strike. The goblins of Gringotts face an impossible situation. They've maintained neutrality for centuries, interested only in gold and their own independence. The goblin rebellions of the past taught them that fighting wizards directly leads to defeat and harsher oppression, so they focused on banking, on making themselves indispensable, on quiet resistance through economic means. But when Voldemort takes over, he doesn't respect their neutrality. Voldemort demands access to the bank, to the wealth of his enemies, to secure storage for his Horcruxes. He threatens the goblins with destruction if they refuse. The goblin leaders, practical and survivalist, comply. They maintain the appearance of neutrality, but everyone knows they're under Death Eater control. Some goblins chafe under this, remembering their proud history, dreaming of rebellion. But they're divided, lacking weapons and training for war, facing an enemy who could destroy them entirely if they resist. A few brave goblins secretly help the resistance. They provide information about Death Eater accounts, about security measures, about when certain vaults will be less guarded. Some even participate in the raid on Gringotts if the resistance attempts to steal Hufflepuff's cup. These goblins risk everything. If discovered, they and their entire families face execution. But they do it anyway, believing that Voldemort's rule is unsustainable, that eventually the debt will come due. Most goblins, though, just try to survive. They process transactions, guard vaults, maintain the bank's operations, and try not to think about the fact that they're enabling a Dark Lord's reign. Some dream of using the chaos to reclaim rights denied to them for centuries. Goblins made the treasures that wizards hoard. They believe those treasures should return to them when the original owner dies. But wizards pass items down through inheritance, keeping goblin-made objects in their families forever. It's a source of ancient resentment. If Voldemort's regime collapses, if there's a power vacuum, some goblins plot to seize that moment, to take back what they believe is rightfully theirs. But it's a distant dream, and survival is the immediate concern. Merpeople in the Black Lake near Hogwarts witnessed the school's transformation firsthand. They've lived in that lake for centuries, longer than Hogwarts has existed. They've seen headmasters come and go, students grow up, wars fought and ended. But they've never seen anything like this. The water itself feels different when Hogwarts falls to darkness. Magic has a quality to it, and dark magic is particularly corrupting. The merpeople sense it in the water, taste it in the currents. Some merpeople advocate for leaving, for seeking cleaner waters, for abandoning a lake that's been their home for so long. Others argue for staying, for bearing witness, for preserving memories of what Hogwarts used to be. The merpeople are divided, their society fracturing under the weight of the decision. Eventually some leave, migrating to lochs in Scotland or seas around Ireland. Others stay, stubborn and determined, becoming silent witnesses to the horror. The merpeople who remain watch students being indoctrinated into dark magic. They see Muggleborns barred from the castle. They observe Death Eater patrols along the shore. And they remember. Merpeople have long memories, longer than humans. They compose songs about these dark times, ballads in their strange underwater language, preserving the truth for future generations. When the darkness eventually ends, if it ends, the merpeople will still be there, ready to tell their story of what happened, ensuring that history isn't rewritten by the victors. The giant squid in the Black Lake, usually gentle despite its size, becomes more aggressive as the corruption spreads. Some students from the corrupted Hogwarts who venture too close to the water disappear, pulled under by massive tentacles. The squid, which used to help students who fell into the lake, now seems to attack them. Whether it's defending its territory against the darkness or whether it's been corrupted itself is unclear. But the message is clear. The lake isn't safe anymore. Even the creatures that were once friendly have turned hostile. Thestrals, the skeletal winged horses visible only to those who've seen death, multiply dramatically in this timeline. With so many people dying, so many students witnessing death, suddenly large portions of the population can see Thestrals. They become more common around the Hogwarts grounds, drawn to the death and darkness. Some Death Eaters use Thestrals as transportation, appreciating their association with death. But Thestrals, despite their appearance, aren't evil creatures. They're gentle if treated well. Some resistance fighters who can see them use Thestrals for quick, stealthy transportation, flying at night when they're nearly invisible. Phoenixes, creatures of light and rebirth, largely disappear from Britain. They're drawn to good people, to those with pure hearts and noble intentions. In a land dominated by Voldemort, there are few such people, and those who exist are in hiding. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, is trapped with him in Azkaban if Dumbledore is still alive. Or Fawkes died when Dumbledore died, burning and failing to be reborn because the darkness is too overwhelming. The absence of phoenixes is noted by those who know about such creatures. It's a sign of how far Britain has fallen, that even the most magical of creatures won't stay. Unicorns, symbols of purity and innocence, become increasingly rare. They retreat to the deepest parts of forests, as far from human civilization as possible. Killing a unicorn is a terrible crime, cursing the killer to a half-life. But some Death Eaters do it anyway, using unicorn blood in dark rituals, or simply killing them to defile something pure. Each unicorn death is a tragedy, a light going out in the world. Some conservationist wizards, even some who aren't part of the resistance, try to protect unicorns, creating wards around their habitats. But it's difficult when the government itself doesn't care about preservation. Acromantulas, the giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest, become even more dangerous without Hagrid to maintain the understanding with them. Aragog, their leader, might still be alive in this timeline, or he might have died, leaving the colony without the restraint he provided. The spiders spread beyond the forest, attacking travelers, potentially even raiding nearby villages. They're not allied with anyone. They're just hungry and aggressive, a danger to everyone. Some Death Eaters try to control them, to use them as weapons, but acromantulas are difficult to command and just as likely to attack Death Eaters as resistance fighters. The Forbidden Forest itself changes. Trees grow closer together, the paths become more treacherous, and the magic of the forest becomes wild and unpredictable. It's as if the forest is reacting to the darkness in the castle, trying to protect itself or perhaps trying to contain the corruption. Strange new creatures appear, dark things drawn to Voldemort's power. The forest, always dangerous, becomes utterly deadly. Only the bravest or most desperate venture into it. But for those who do, who learn its secrets, the forest can provide hiding places, resources, and pathways that Death Eaters can't follow. International magical creatures, those not native to Britain, start to notice the changes. Magical creatures are sensitive to the balance of magic in the world. When Britain falls to darkness, it creates ripples that spread outward. Some creatures, particularly dark ones, are drawn to Britain, migrating toward the concentration of dark magic. Others flee, avoiding the contaminated area. Magizoologists in other countries write papers about the phenomenon, studying how Voldemort's rise affects magical creature populations and behaviors. But they study from a distance, from safety, not willing to risk entering Britain to help. The few resistance victories in this dark timeline become legendary precisely because they're so rare. When the resistance manages to destroy a Horcrux, even one, it's celebrated as a triumph. The story spreads through the underground network, passed from safe house to safe house, giving people hope that Voldemort can be hurt. When resistance fighters rescue prisoners from a Death Eater stronghold, survivors tell the story for years, embellishing it, turning the rescuers into heroes. When a particularly cruel Death Eater is assassinated, people whisper about it with satisfaction, a reminder that Death Eaters aren't invincible. These victories matter not just for their practical effect, but for their psychological impact. They prove that resistance is possible, that Voldemort isn't all-powerful, that fighting back isn't suicide. Every small victory undermines the narrative that Death Eater rule is inevitable and eternal. It keeps the spark of hope alive in people who might otherwise give up. Even if the resistance ultimately fails, even if they're all killed, The stories of their defiance survive, passed down, inspiring future generations to try again. Consider a specific mission that becomes legend. Maybe it's the theft of Hufflepuff's cup from Gringotts. In the original timeline, Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke into Gringotts, a feat so audacious it was considered impossible. In this timeline, the stakes are even higher. The Resistance needs to destroy Horcruxes to weaken Voldemort, but first they need to find and steal them. Gringotts is now heavily guarded, with Death Eaters patrolling, goblins under threat, and security measures enhanced. The mission requires months of planning. The Resistance identifies which vault holds the cup through intelligence gathered from captured Death Eaters or sympathetic goblins. They assemble a team, someone who can impersonate a Death Eater, someone with curse-breaking skills, someone who can handle a dragon if necessary, and someone expendable to stay behind and cover the retreat. The team knows it's likely a suicide mission. Breaking into Gringotts is hard. Breaking out is nearly impossible. The infiltration happens at night. The team uses Polyjuice Potion to impersonate legitimate vault visitors, moves through the bank under scrutiny, descends into the deepest levels where the most secure vaults are kept. They're confronted by the thief's downfall, which washes away enchantments, ending their disguises prematurely. A fight breaks out. Curses fly in the narrow tunnels. Goblins sound alarms. Death Eaters respond. The team fights their way to the vault, blasts it open, and finds the cup among piles of cursed treasure. Every item they touch multiplies, burning them, filling the vault. They grab the cup, use a Horcrux-destroying method, maybe a basilisk fang salvaged from the chamber or the sword of Gryffindor if they have it, and destroy it right there. Voldemort, wherever he is, screams in pain, feeling a part of his soul die. The escape is chaos. The team releases the dragon guarding the high-security vaults, a massive Ukrainian ironbelly that hasn't seen sunlight in years. It goes berserk, destroying everything in its path. The team rides the dragon up through the bank, through layers of security, bursting out onto Diagon Alley in an explosion of debris and dragon fire. They leap from the dragon mid-flight, using arresto momentum to avoid dying on impact, and scatter. Some make it back to safe houses. Others are captured or killed, but they destroyed a Horcrux. The mission is a success. This story becomes legendary in the Resistance. People tell it around fires, in whispered conversations, embellishing it with each telling. The dragon becomes bigger, the fight more desperate, the heroes braver. It gives people something to believe in, proof that Voldemort can be beaten, and it terrifies Death Eaters, who realize that their master's greatest secrets are known, that the Resistance isn't just hiding, they're hunting. Another legendary mission might be the liberation of Azkaban prisoners. If Dumbledore is still alive and imprisoned, the Resistance needs him. His knowledge, his power, his ability to inspire and lead are irreplaceable. Breaking into Azkaban is even harder than breaking into Gringotts. The island is surrounded by Dementors, the sea is treacherous, and the prison itself is designed to be escape-proof. But the Resistance has to try. They plan for months, gathering information about guard rotations, Dementor patterns, the layout of the prison. They recruit everyone who can cast a Patronus, creating a small army of silver light. They steal a ship, sail to Azkaban under cover of night and fog, and launch their assault. The Patronuses drive back the Dementors, creating a perimeter of safety. The team blasts through the prison walls, fights the guards, and searches for Dumbledore's cell. They find him barely alive, aged decades in just a couple years, his mind fractured by Dementor exposure. But he's still Dumbledore. When they break him out, when he breathes fresh air for the first time in years, something of his old power returns. He helps them escape, casting spells that no one else could manage, and they sail away from Azkaban as it burns behind them, other prisoners fleeing into the night. Dumbledore's rescue changes everything. With him leading the Resistance, they have a chance. He knows about Horcruxes. He can train Harry properly. He can organize the scattered remnants of the Order of the Phoenix into an actual fighting force. The mission to rescue him becomes the turning point, the moment when the Resistance stops just surviving and starts actually fighting to win. Or maybe the legendary mission is an assassination. Perhaps they target Bellatrix Lestrange, Voldemort's most loyal and sadistic follower. She's killed countless Resistance members, tortured prisoners for information, spread terror wherever she goes. The Resistance decides she needs to die, both for practical reasons and for morale. If they can kill Bellatrix, they can kill anyone. They track her movements, learn her patterns, set a trap. When she arrives, they spring the ambush. The fight is vicious. Bellatrix is incredibly powerful and completely insane, laughing as she fights, enjoying the battle. She kills several resistance fighters before they finally bring her down. Her death is a blow to Voldemort, both because he valued her and because it proves his inner circle isn't untouchable. The resistance celebrates, though they mourn their dead. It's a costly victory, but a necessary one. These missions, these moments of triumph, sustain the resistance through the darkest times. They're proof that fighting isn't pointless, that actions matter, that even against impossible odds, victory is possible. The people who carry out these missions become heroes, their names remembered and honored. If they die as martyrs, inspiring others to take up the fight. If they survive, they become leaders, their experience and courage valuable beyond measure. But for every mission that succeeds, dozens fail. For every Horcrux destroyed, 10 Resistance members die. The war is brutal, unforgiving, with Death Eaters having every advantage. They control the government, the resources, the trained fighters. The Resistance has only desperation, determination, and the knowledge that if they don't fight, everyone they love will die or worse. It's not enough to guarantee victory, but it's enough to keep them fighting. The concept of time becomes strange in this dark timeline. Days blur together when you're constantly hiding, constantly afraid. Some Resistance members lose track of dates, of seasons, of how long they've been fighting. Others mark time obsessively, counting the days until significant events, birthdays of the dead, anniversaries of battles lost and won. Time becomes both meaningless and all-important, stretching endlessly while also racing past. For people living under Death Eater rule, time is measured differently. They mark time by new laws, new restrictions, new horrors. The year they closed Hogwarts. The year they started executing Muggleborns publicly. The year they banned all non-human magical beings from cities. Each new atrocity becomes a milestone, a marker of how far society has fallen. People remember what year it was when they lost specific freedoms, specific loved ones, specific hopes. Children growing up in this timeline have no concept of how things used to be unless their parents tell them. And many parents don't, afraid that filling their children's heads with stories of better times will make them dissatisfied, rebellious, targets for Death Eater attention. So a generation grows up knowing only oppression, thinking it's normal, believing that this is just how the world is. Some parents, though, refuse to let the truth die. They tell their children about Dumbledore, about Hogwarts as it was, about a world where Muggleborns weren't hunted. These children grow up with a sense that things are wrong, that this isn't how it should be, and some of them become the next generation of Resistance fighters. Education in this dark timeline is corrupted almost beyond recognition. The reopened Hogwarts teaches dark magic openly, with courses on torture curses, on how to identify and capture Muggleborns, on pure-blood history that emphasizes wizarding superiority. Students learn to cast unforgivable curses on animals, then on prisoners. They're taught that compassion is weakness, that power is the only thing that matters, that serving Voldemort is the highest honor. Some students accept this indoctrination completely, becoming true believers. Others go through the motions while secretly questioning, knowing that expressing doubt means punishment or death. A few brave students form secret study groups where they learn real magic, defensive spells, trying to hold on to the knowledge that will be needed when the Resistance needs new fighters. These groups are constantly at risk of discovery, and when they're caught, the punishments are severe. Teachers at the corrupted Hogwarts are either Death Eaters themselves or people forced to teach under threat. Some genuinely believe in what they're teaching. Others hate every moment but cooperate to survive. A very few try to sabotage the curriculum subtly, teaching the prescribed dark material, but also sneaking in lessons about defensive magic, about ethics, about the values Hogwarts used to represent. These teachers walk a razor's edge, always one mistake away from being arrested or killed. The house system at Hogwarts is twisted. Slytherin becomes the favored house, receiving special privileges, their students groomed for positions of power. Gryffindor, traditionally opposed to Slytherin, is viewed with suspicion, their students watched carefully for signs of rebellion. Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw exist in a strange middle ground, neither favored nor particularly oppressed, expected to keep their heads down and not cause trouble. The house rivalries, once friendly competition, become deadly serious. Students from Gryffindor who antagonize Slytherin students might disappear, officially expelled but really imprisoned or killed. The Sorting Hat, that ancient magical artifact, faces an ethical crisis. It's designed to sort students into houses based on their qualities and potential. But how does it sort in a world gone mad? Does it put brave students into Gryffindor, knowing they'll be targeted? Does it put cunning students into Slytherin, knowing they'll be groomed as Death Eaters? The Sorting Hat, being somewhat sentient, agonizes over these choices. Some believe it starts sorting more students into Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, trying to keep them safe by making them less visible. Others think it sorts honestly, trusting that true Gryffindors and Slytherins will make the right choices regardless of circumstances. Quidditch. The beloved wizarding sport continues at Hogwarts but becomes more violent. Fouls are ignored or encouraged. Players are seriously injured regularly. Some matches become barely disguised blood sports, with students from disfavored houses targeted by Slytherin players while teachers look the other way. The joy of flying, of competition, is tainted by the darkness infecting everything else. Some students refuse to play, unwilling to participate in the corruption. Others throw themselves into Quidditch as an escape, a way to feel something other than fear and despair, even if just for a few hours. The Room of Requirement. If anyone remembers it exists or figures out how to access it, becomes incredibly important. It's the one place in Hogwarts that Death Eaters can't fully control, that adapts to the needs of its user. If Resistance members or sympathetic students make it into the castle, if they need a place to hide, the room could shelter them. It could provide what they need: weapons, supplies, even information. The Ravenclaw diadem is still hidden there among piles of junk, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes waiting to be destroyed. If someone figures out it exists and that the diadem is there, they could infiltrate Hogwarts, navigate to the Room of Requirement, and destroy it. Such a mission would be incredibly dangerous, almost suicidal. Hogwarts is full of Death Eaters, patrolling students who report anything suspicious, and protective enchantments specifically designed to catch intruders. Getting in undetected would require Polyjuice Potion, invisibility cloaks, immense skill, and tremendous luck. The infiltrator would need to know exactly where they're going and what they're looking for. They'd have minutes, maybe less, to find the diadem among thousands of objects in the room, destroy it, and escape. But if they succeeded, it would be another Horcrux destroyed, another piece of Voldemort's soul gone, bringing him closer to mortality. Time travel emerges as a tempting possibility for the desperate. Time turners exist, devices that allow a person to travel back in time, though they're heavily regulated and rare. If the Resistance could get their hands on one, could they go back and prevent the chamber from opening? Could they warn their past selves, save Ginny, stop Voldemort's early return? The idea is seductive, a way to undo all the horror, to reset the timeline to the way it should have been. But time turners follow strict rules. You can't change time, only fulfill it. Everything that happens has already happened, creating a closed time loop. Anyone going back would discover they were always part of the events. They can't stop Ginny's death because it already happened. They can't prevent Hogwarts' closure because it already occurred. The timeline is fixed, unless someone finds a way to break those rules, some piece of lost magic that allows true changes to the past rather than closed loops. Time travel offers no salvation. Some desperate Resistance members try anyway. Maybe they get a time turner, go back to that crucial day in May 1993, and try to help Harry save Ginny. But they discover that their past selves don't see them, that events unfold exactly as they remember, that the timeline resists change. Or worse, they discover that their intervention was always part of what happened, that they were there all along, and their presence didn't change anything. The disappointment breaks them. The knowledge that even time travel can't save them, that they're trapped in this dark timeline with no escape, is crushing. There's a theoretical possibility of deeper time magic, magic beyond time turners that could actually change the past, rather than just revisiting it. Some Resistance researchers dig into ancient texts, looking for references to such magic. They find hints, suggestions, warnings about magic that can rewrite reality at a fundamental level. But such magic, if it exists, requires a price. Not just magical power, but something more personal, more costly. Maybe it requires the caster's life. Maybe it requires sacrificing their very existence, erasing themselves from the timeline to create a better one where they never existed. It's the ultimate sacrifice, and whether anyone would be willing to make it becomes a profound moral question. The Ministry of Magic building in London, once a symbol of government and magical society, becomes a monument to tyranny. The atrium, where the Fountain of Magical Brethren once stood showing wizard, witch, centaur, goblin, and house elf in harmony, is replaced with something darker. A massive statue dominates the space now, depicting Voldemort himself, towering and terrible, standing on a mountain of muggle bodies. The inscription carved into the base proclaims the natural superiority of pureblood wizards, the righteousness of Voldemort's rule, the inevitable dominance of magic over mundanity. Every wizard and witch who enters the ministry sees this statue, a constant reminder of who rules, who conquered, who won. Some become numb to it, passing by without looking, their minds protecting them from the horror by refusing to fully process it. Others feel sick every time they enter, bile rising in their throats as they're forced to walk past this monument to evil. A few resistant sympathizers spit at it when no one's watching. Tiny acts of defiance that mean nothing but help them hold on to their humanity, prove to themselves that they haven't completely surrendered. The offices within the ministry have been reorganized entirely. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is now the Department of Pure Blood Protection, focused entirely on hunting Muggleborns and enforcing blood purity laws. The Department of Mysteries continues its work, but now under direct Death Eater supervision, researching dark magic and ways to enhance Voldemort's power. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures has been renamed the Department of Non-Human Management. Its purpose changed from regulation to subjugation. Every department serves Voldemort's vision. Every employee either a true believer or someone too afraid to resist. The courtrooms where trials once occurred are now used for show trials and public executions. Accused Muggleborns or blood traitors are brought before kangaroo courts where the verdict is predetermined. There's no defense, no real evidence presented, just a performance to legitimize state murder. Crowds are sometimes forced to attend these trials, required to witness what happens to those who violate pure blood supremacy. The message is clear: obey or die. Some people become desensitized to the horror, watching executions with blank faces. Others never adjust, leaving each trial haunted by what they've seen. The Department of Mysteries takes on sinister importance in this timeline. Death Eaters have access to all its secrets now, all the strange and powerful magic studied there. The prophecy about Harry and Voldemort is still stored in the Hall of Prophecy, a glass sphere containing the words that foretold their connection. Voldemort knows about it, knows that it says neither can live while the other survives. He's obsessed with it, visiting the department regularly to stare at the prophecy, trying to understand how to circumvent it. The time room, full of time-turners and temporal magic, becomes a research priority. Death Eaters and Ministry researchers work to understand time magic more deeply, hoping to find ways to see the future, to prevent threats before they emerge. Maybe even to go back and ensure Voldemort's rise happened differently, more completely. They make little progress. Time magic resists easy manipulation, its secrets hidden behind paradoxes and dangers that even skilled researchers can't overcome. But they keep trying, driven by Voldemort's desire to transcend all limitations, including time itself. The death chamber, where the veil hangs in its archway, becomes a place of execution. Prisoners are thrown through the veil, their screams cutting off instantly as they pass beyond, dead or transported somewhere unreachable. It's considered a cleaner method than the killing curse, leaving no bodies, no evidence. Some Death Eaters are disturbed by the veil, sensing the wrongness of it, the way it pulls at them when they get too close. Others are fascinated, wondering what lies beyond, whether it could be used for something other than execution. Voldemort himself avoids the death chamber, uncomfortable with something that represents death so absolutely, when he's spent his life trying to escape it. The Daily Prophet, once a somewhat neutral newspaper, becomes pure propaganda under Death Eater control. Every edition praises Voldemort, announces new victories, lists the names of captured traitors alongside their crimes and punishments. There's a section celebrating Death Eaters who distinguish themselves in service, complete with interviews and profiles making them seem heroic. Obituaries are long and frequent, but never mention if the deceased was murdered by the regime. Everything is coded language and lies, the truth buried under layers of misdirection. Rita Skeeter, if she's still alive and writing, thrives in this environment. Her talent for sensationalism and disregard for truth make her perfect for propaganda work. She writes hit pieces on resistance members, inventing scandals and crimes, painting them as monsters and terrorists. She interviews Death Eaters sympathetically, making them seem reasonable and justified. She crafts narratives that support the regime's goals, all while believing she's just doing good journalism, reporting the news. Or perhaps she knows exactly what she's doing and doesn't care. As long as she's successful and safe, the Quibbler, if it survives, becomes the only source of real news. Distributed in secret, its readers risking their lives to stay informed. Xenophilius Lovegood, Luna's father, continues publishing despite the danger, driven by a commitment to truth and a refusal to let Voldemort control the narrative completely. The Quibbler is passed hand to hand in dark alleys, hidden in false book covers, distributed through networks of resistant sympathizers. Reading it is illegal. Possessing it means arrest. But people do it anyway because they need to know the truth. Need to remember that the Daily Prophet's version of reality isn't the only one. The Quibbler publishes coded messages for the resistance, obituaries for resistance fighters that the Daily Prophet ignores, and articles exposing Death Eater crimes. It also maintains some of its original eccentric content. Stories about crumple-horned snorkax and conspiracy theories, partly because Xenophilius still believes in them and partly as cover, making the paper seem less dangerous than it is. Death Eaters hunt for the Quibbler's printing location, trying to shut it down permanently. But Xenophilius keeps moving, stays hidden, continues publishing against all odds. Families are destroyed not just by death but by division in this dark timeline. Pure-blood families split between those who join Voldemort enthusiastically, those who do so reluctantly to survive, and those who resist openly or quietly. Siblings stop speaking to each other, choosing opposite sides in the war. Parents disown children who join the resistance or who become Death Eaters, depending on the family's values. Children turn in their parents to authorities to prove their loyalty to the regime, betraying the people who raised them for approval or safety. The bonds that should be strongest become weapons. Every family gathering is tense, every conversation potentially dangerous because someone might be an informer. Trust becomes impossible when your own brother might report you for speaking against Voldemort, when your sister might be a Death Eater, when your parents might be secretly sheltering Muggleborns. Families fracture, isolate, become islands of individuals afraid to connect even with their own blood. The social fabric of Wizarding Britain tears apart completely, leaving isolated people afraid to trust anyone. The concept of childhood innocence is destroyed in this timeline. Children grow up learning dark magic in school, learning to hate Muggleborns without ever questioning why, learning that might makes right and that compassion is weakness. They're encouraged to report their parents if they hear dissent at home, to spy on their families for the regime. Youth groups are formed, essentially junior Death Eaters, where children as young as 10 learn to cast curses, to follow orders without question, to embrace cruelty as strength. Some children resist the indoctrination instinctively, clinging to values their parents whisper about at night, sensing that something is fundamentally wrong with what they're being taught. But many accept it completely. They don't know anything different, have no framework for questioning the worldview being forced on them. To them, this is normal. This is how society works. And they'll carry these lessons into adulthood, creating a generation that doesn't question Voldemort's rule because they literally cannot imagine an alternative. The long-term damage to society is incalculable, a moral corruption that will take generations to heal even if Voldemort is eventually defeated. The psychological warfare extends far beyond obvious violence. Memory charms are used extensively, systematically, making people doubt their own minds. Did that conversation actually happen? Did I see someone disappear or did I imagine it? Was my friend always loyal to Voldemort, or were their memories changed? The uncertainty is maddening, more cruel than physical torture, because it attacks the foundation of identity itself. People start questioning everything, unable to trust their own memories, their own perceptions of reality. Some people keep journals, writing down what they remember each day, trying to maintain continuity of experience. But even that's dangerous if the journal is found. And how can you trust what past you wrote? Maybe those memories were already false when they were recorded. The regime uses this psychological instability deliberately, keeping people off balance, never sure what's real. It's easier to control a population that doesn't trust their own minds. That's always second-guessing themselves. That can't organize resistance because they can't even trust their memories of conversations about organizing. Azkaban, always terrible, becomes even worse under full Death Eater control. More prisoners, less oversight, crueler conditions than ever before. The Dementors are given free rein to torment inmates as much as they want, no longer constrained by even minimal regulations. Prisoners are tortured regularly, both for information and for sport. Trials are a joke when they happen at all. Most people are simply disappeared into Azkaban without any legal process. Their families never told what happened to them, never given a chance to say goodbye. Visits are forbidden completely. Even the pretense of humane treatment is abandoned. Prisoners receive minimal food, just enough to keep them alive so they can suffer longer. Medical care is non-existent. The sick and injured are left to die in their cells, their bodies removed only when the smell becomes unbearable. Azkaban becomes a black hole where people disappear forever. The threat of being sent there is enough to ensure compliance from many people who might otherwise resist. Better to keep your head down, to collaborate, to survive, than to end up in that nightmare prison. If Dumbledore is still imprisoned there, he's likely gone mad by now, or he's dead. His body left to rot in a cell while the regime celebrates the destruction of their greatest enemy. The idea of the most powerful wizard of the age dying alone in darkness, driven insane by Dementors, unable to help the world he tried to protect, is one of the cruelest aspects of this timeline. Or perhaps Dumbledore holds on somehow, maintaining his sanity through meditation or magic, waiting for rescue that might never come, the eternal optimist hoping even in the darkest place imaginable. Places that were once safe, once welcoming, become dangerous and hostile. Diagon Alley, the magical shopping street where Harry first discovered the wizarding world, is now patrolled constantly by Death Eaters. Their presence is both protection and threat, keeping order while reminding everyone who's in charge. Shops that served Muggleborns are closed permanently, their windows broken, spray-painted with slurs. Some buildings are burned-out shells, destroyed during riots or deliberate attacks. The vibrant, exciting street full of wonder is now a place of fear and oppression. Ollivanders, if Ollivander didn't flee or wasn't killed, makes wands only for approved customers. Blood status is checked before service is rendered. Muggleborns are turned away, and anyone suspected of resistance sympathies is reported to authorities. Ollivander himself, if he's alive, might be doing this under duress, hating every moment but unable to refuse without being killed or replaced. Or perhaps he fled early, escaping abroad or going into hiding, and someone else runs the shop now. Someone with fewer scruples and more enthusiasm for the regime. Flourish and blots. The bookshop sells only approved texts now. Books about dark magic, pure-blood propaganda, histories rewritten to support Voldemort's worldview. Any book that contradicts the official narrative is banned, removed from shelves, burned. The shopkeeper maintains a list of forbidden titles and reports anyone who asks for them. Some resistant sympathizers run illegal lending libraries, preserving banned books, distributing them secretly, but it's incredibly dangerous. Being caught with forbidden books means imprisonment or death. Gringotts operates under Death Eater control, the goblins subjugated but maintaining the bank's operations because they have no choice. Every transaction is monitored. Accounts of suspected resistance members are frozen or seized. The bank that should be neutral, serving all customers equally, is now just another tool of oppression. The goblins resent this bitterly, but lack the power to resist openly. Some help the resistance secretly when they can, but most just focus on survival, doing their jobs, trying to avoid attention. The leaky cauldron, once welcoming to all witches and wizards, now checks blood status at the door. Muggleborns are barred entirely. Half-bloods are served but watched carefully, seated in specific areas, treated as second-class customers. Purebloods receive preferential treatment, better tables, better service. Tom, the innkeeper, if he's still running the place, either enforces these rules enthusiastically or does so reluctantly, depending on his true loyalties. Either way, the warm, welcoming pub that served as a gateway to the magical world is now just another segregated, hostile space. Hogsmeade, the all-magical village near Hogwarts, changes dramatically too. The Three Broomsticks might still operate, but Madame Rosmerta serves Death Eaters now, whether willingly or under threat. Her pub, once full of laughter and butterbeer, becomes a place where Death Eaters gather, where they drink and celebrate their victories, where they toast Voldemort's health. Some villagers avoid the pub entirely, unable to stomach being in the same room as their oppressors. Others go anyway, needing the social connection, pretending everything is normal, even though nothing is. Zonko's joke shop closes because jokes aren't encouraged anymore in this grim society. Laughter is viewed with suspicion, joy seen as inappropriate when there's so much work to be done building the new order. The shop stands empty, its windows dark. a reminder of better times when people could laugh without fear. Honeydukes survives because even Death Eaters want candy. Even tyrants have sweet teeth, but the cheerful atmosphere is gone. The shop serves customers efficiently, joylessly. Transactions completed quickly so people can leave and return to whatever passes for their lives. The Shrieking Shack, once just a creepy abandoned building with a secret history, might become an actual place of death in this timeline. Perhaps it's used for executions or torture, its remote location and soundproofed rooms perfect for activities the regime wants hidden. Or perhaps it remains abandoned. But stories circulate about people being taken there and never returning. About screams heard on quiet nights. About lights seen in windows that should be dark. Whether the stories are true or just urban legends born from fear, the Shrieking Shack becomes even more sinister than it was. The Burrow, the Weasley family home if it still stands, is either empty or occupied by survivors who are shells of who they were. The warmth and chaos that defined the house, the laughter of too many children in too small a space, the love that permeated every room, all of that is gone. Maybe the house was burned down in retaliation for the family's resistance activities, destroyed deliberately to send a message. Maybe it's been repurposed, given to a loyal Death Eater family as a reward. And the new occupants don't know or care about the love that once filled those walls. Or maybe Molly and Arthur still live there, surviving but broken. Their house quiet now that their children are dead or scattered. They maintain it as best they can, keeping rooms ready for children who will never come home, unable to let go. The Burrow becomes a memorial, a place where resistance members sometimes visit to remember what they're fighting for, to see what they've lost. The garden gnomes still infest the yard. The ghoul still bangs in the attic. But the life, the joy, the family that made the Burrow special is gone. Physical places carry memory, and their transformation represents the broader tragedy. The Burrow going from a home full of love to an empty shell or a Death Eater residence symbolizes what's happened to all of Britain. Places that represented hope, safety, and community are now corrupted, destroyed, or abandoned. The geography of the magical world becomes a map of loss. Every location tied to memories of what was and what might have been. The night bus, if it still operates, might be one of the last semi-free spaces in magical Britain. Its magic makes it hard for Death Eaters to control or monitor effectively. Stan Shunpike and Ernie Prang might still be picking up passengers, asking no questions, helping people escape to the edges of the country or to ports where they can flee abroad. The night bus becomes an underground railroad of sorts, moving resistance members, smuggling information, rescuing people who need to disappear. Or perhaps the night bus was shut down early, deemed too risky, too uncontrollable, too useful for people trying to escape. Stan and Ernie might be imprisoned or killed for refusing to cooperate with demands to report passengers. Public magical transportation becomes heavily restricted. You need papers to travel, identification checked at every stop. Port keys require authorization that's rarely granted. Apparition is monitored through tracking spells. Freedom of movement dies, and with it, the ability to organize resistance or escape persecution. Celebrations become absurd in this timeline. How do you celebrate Christmas when people are dying? How do you mark birthdays when the person you're celebrating might not live another year? How do you observe holidays when every tradition has been corrupted or banned? Some people stop celebrating entirely, unable to find joy in a world of horror. Others continue celebrating specifically because it matters, because refusing to let Voldemort steal everything is its own form of resistance. The resistance makes a point of marking important dates. They celebrate Christmas in safe houses, exchanging small gifts, sharing meals, trying to create moments of normalcy and joy. They observe birthdays, especially for children, trying to give them some semblance of childhood despite everything. They hold ceremonies for the dead, funerals when bodies can be recovered, memorials when they can't, ensuring that people are remembered and honored. These celebrations are acts of rebellion, assertions that Death Eaters control actions but not spirits, that humanity endures even in darkness. Love endures too, and that might be the most important thing of all in this nightmare timeline. Couples still fall in love, still marry despite the danger, still have children even though bringing a child into this world seems cruel. But life insists on continuing. Babies are born in hidden rooms, delivered by resistance medics, welcomed into a world of horror with the same joy any parent feels. These children are hope incarnate, proof that the future exists even if it's uncertain. Children born into this timeline laugh before they learn to be afraid. They love before they learn to hate. They play before they understand danger, and their parents fight to keep them that way as long as possible, to give them moments of innocence, to let them be children even briefly. Every child born is an act of hope, a statement that the future might be better, that humanity continues regardless of tyranny. Voldemort can kill individuals, torture populations, corrupt institutions, but he can't kill the human impulse toward love, connection, and hope. That's his fundamental weakness, the one thing he's never understood. Because even in the darkest timeline, even when evil triumphs and reigns for years or decades, it's not permanent. Nothing is. Empires fall. Tyrants die. The only question is how long it takes and how much damage is done first. This timeline where the Chamber of Secrets was never closed is darker, longer, more painful than the original. More people die. More suffering occurs. The victory, if it comes, costs exponentially more. But the fundamental truth remains unchanged. Voldemort, for all his power and all his Horcruxes and all his armies, is still just a broken man who chose dark magic and immortality because he feared death and couldn't understand love. Those weaknesses exist in this timeline too. They can be exploited by people brave enough, smart enough, desperate enough to try. Voldemort can be beaten. It's just harder, bloodier, takes longer, and might require sacrifices that no one should have to make. The lesson of this dark timeline isn't that one moment dooms everything forever. It's that moments matter. Choices matter. Harry choosing to go into the chamber, choosing to fight, choosing to destroy the diary. Those choices saved countless lives, prevented decades of suffering, preserved a world where children could attend school safely. In this alternate timeline where those choices went differently or couldn't be made, the consequences are catastrophic beyond measure. But that emphasizes how much good individuals can do, how much one person's courage can change the world in profound ways. Harry saved the entire world at 12 years old by stabbing a book with a fang. It's absurd when you think about it, almost comically simple and yet profound in its implications. The smallest acts can have the largest consequences, for good or for ill. A moment of bravery changes everything. A moment of failure destroys everything. The line between triumph and tragedy is razor thin. What if the Chamber of Secrets was never closed? The answer is clear and terrible. The wizarding world falls into darkness. Britain becomes a totalitarian state ruled by a dark lord. Hogwarts is either destroyed or corrupted beyond recognition. Thousands die in purges and wars. The characters we love are killed, traumatized, or twisted into unrecognizable versions of themselves. International chaos spreads as neighboring countries react to a magical dictatorship. The Muggle world might be exposed to magic in catastrophic ways. The future looks bleak, hopeless, dominated by evil and suffering. But even in that nightmare, even in the darkest possible timeline, some people resist. Some fight back. Some refuse to surrender hope. They might fail. They probably fail. The odds are impossible. The enemy too strong. The corruption too deep. But they try anyway because that's what heroes do. They fight not because victory is certain, but because fighting is right. They resist not because they'll win, but because they must. And maybe, eventually, after tremendous cost and decades of suffering, light returns. Maybe Harry, older and scarred and traumatized but still determined, finally destroys the last Horcrux and kills Voldemort. Maybe Neville becomes the hero the prophecy needed when Harry couldn't. Maybe a new generation rises up. Children who grew up in darkness but choose light anyway, who finish what their parents started. Maybe it takes 50 years or 100, but eventually Voldemort falls. His empire crumbles, and Britain begins the long, painful process of healing and rebuilding. Or maybe this dark timeline just continues forever. A permanent scar on reality, a version of events where evil won and kept winning. Where students never returned to Hogwarts as it was meant to be. Where the chamber stayed open, a wound in the castle that never healed. Where the basilisk remained alive in the depths, occasionally emerging to kill at its master's command. Where Tom Riddle's diary was never destroyed, and through it, through that one preserved memory, he conquered everything. A timeline we're fortunate we don't live in because, in our reality, a 12-year-old boy was brave enough, fast enough, lucky enough to stab a book and save everything. The difference between our world and that dark timeline is one moment, one choice, one act of courage from a child who didn't even know what he was really accomplishing. He thought he was just saving Ginny Weasley. He didn't know he was destroying a Horcrux, preventing Voldemort's early return, preserving Hogwarts, protecting thousands of future students, maintaining the balance of the entire wizarding world. Harry Potter saved everything, and he did it without understanding the full implications of his actions. That's heroism in its purest form. That's how fragile everything is. That's how important heroes are, even young and untrained ones. That's why, even in fiction, even in alternate timelines and what-if scenarios, we should remember and honor those moments when people choose right instead of wrong, choose bravery instead of fear, choose action instead of hiding. Because those choices matter more than anything else. They're the difference between a world of light and a world of darkness, between hope and despair, between life and death. The Chamber of Secrets closed in our timeline because Harry Potter made it close. We're lucky it did. We're lucky we live in the timeline where a 12-year-old boy succeeded against impossible odds, where Ginny Weasley lived, where Hogwarts stayed open, where Voldemort didn't return until years later when Harry was better prepared to face him. We're lucky that the nightmare timeline where none of that happened remains imaginary, a dark mirror showing us how bad things could have been, how close we came to disaster, how much we owe to one moment of courage. So the next time you think about Harry Potter, about that scene in the Chamber of Secrets, about the basilisk fang plunging into Tom Riddle's diary, remember what really happened there. Remember that Harry saved more than Ginny. He saved everything. He prevented the darkest timeline from becoming reality. And in doing so, he proved that heroes matter, that choices matter, that one person can make a difference that echoes through decades and shapes the fate of entire civilizations. That's the true magic of that moment, and that's why it matters so much.